love you so. Let them whisper, for they know not what's between you and I. I'll keep on loving you until
and we're on Let Them Talk. Hi, I'm Paul DeRienzo.
And I'm Miss Joan Marie Musi.
How are you? And our guest, Peter Lance, visiting us again on the occasion of the release of his third novel on this issue. You've written other novels.
Non-fiction. Not a novel.
Right, non-fiction. And it's called Triple Cross.
And here it is, and behind us.
And behind us you can see the cover. And wow, Peter, you since we had you on last, you've been busy in producing this book, and I know you had the National Geographic special, and you've been on just in the last couple of days. Where have you been interviewed? In just the last
I was cut out of we should add that the National Geographic Channel cut me out of my own documentary, and they replaced me with the FBI agent I accused in part of being negligent on the road to 9/11. So that's so much for the par for the course, you know. But I've had that magazine, that yellow magazine, since I was a kid, and I don't know about my subscription now. But anyway, ironically, this book that Joni is holding has the entire story. There are really two stories, and this is as you know, it's my third book, and a 5-year investigation. First book, 1,000 Years for Revenge, I basically proved that the 2 attacks on the Trade Center were done by Ramzi Yousef, who set them in, did the bombing, the first bombing in '93, and then created the planes as missiles plot. And then the second book, Cover Up, went into a treasure trove of al-Qaeda evidence that was suppressed by the feds. These are investigative books that look at the 2 bin Laden offices of origin, the Southern District Prosecutor's Office and the New York office of the FBI. And frankly, until I came along and started doing this, no one has ever really audited them before. The 9/11 Commission gave them a complete pass because one of the principal lawyers on the commission that basically pushed the plot forward 2 years, the origin, was Dietrich Snell, who was a former prosecutor in the Southern District. So this is the first time a reporter has really gone to connect all the dots. And what are my sources? I mean, the reason this book is so heavy you could press your shirts with it, it has 50 pages of endnotes. It has a 32-page timeline in the middle I'm very proud of.
And that's like a book in itself.
This is where my publisher, Reagan HarperCollins, to be commended, because most books you have a few black and white photos in the middle.
That's right.
This allows you to read this book in parts. If you put it down, you forget where you are, who's that guy, you go back, it's all pegged to the page of the book. And then at the end of the book, I have 30 pages of appendices of heretofore, classified documents that from the Justice Department and elsewhere that basically prove what I'm trying to say here, and that is that Al-Qaeda's chief spy, who was Ali Muhammad, who, let me see if I can point like a weatherman in the opposite direction,
Joni.
Like that fellow over there,
yes.
Ali Muhammad was, these are the headlines on Ali Muhammad. He's an ex-Egyptian army officer who has spoke 4 languages, including Hebrew, had 2 psychology degrees. He was in the unit that murdered Anwar Sadat in 1981, only he escaped scrutiny because at the time he was on an officer exchange program at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He gets drummed out of the Egyptian army when Mubarak takes over because he's too radical, and basically he's adopted by Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri. And anybody that wants to, I have a website, my name, peterlance.com. If you go there, you can even download now, right now, if you're polyphasic, watch TV and computer, you can download the first part of the timeline, and you'll see Dr. al-Zawahiri was jailed for the murder of Sadat, and he basically sees the potential in Ali Muhammad as a spy. So what he does is he gets him to get a job at Egypt Air. So he infiltrates Egypt Air, the state airline, for a year, learns their entire counterterrorism, air piracy, program. Then he gets out, and now the CIA is hungry for any Islamic speakers because they've had the Marine barracks bombing in '83, the embassy's blown up. So he goes to the Cairo station of the CIA, presents himself. They send him to Hamburg, and they hire him essentially as an asset to infiltrate a Hezbollah cell, according to the CIA. Although again, none of this you can ever verify with the CIA. He blew his cover, and they cut him loose. However, mysteriously, he's on a watch list. He gets a visa for the U.S., and now he's coming in on a TWA flight. He meets a woman 10 years older than him, and effectively seduces her on the plane so that they get married 6 weeks later at a drive-through wedding chapel in Reno, Nevada, okay? And now he's watering the lawn of her condo. Yeah, now he's in Santa Clara, California, the heart of Silicon Valley, and he's got cover now. He's got a place to live. He's got an American wife, begins application for citizenship, and now he enlists in the U.S. Army. Where does he end up? Fort Bragg at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare School, one of the most elite units for officer training in the military. So he's there, he's at E5, works his way up to sergeant, and even though he doesn't have the security clearance, he's stealing top secret memos. Like one of the memos I have in the book, in the appendices, I'll have to throw my glasses on for this, but just imagine if the Soviets had gotten their hands on this at the height of the Cold War, they would have paid $1 million for this one document. Now, you won't be able to read it, obviously, although it's on peterlance.com.
I can hold it closer to the
camera.
Hold it.
All right, yeah.
Sure.
Just
to give folks,
that would be cool.
Hold it.
And you'll see there's some Arabic writing there. That Arabic writing is Ali Muhammad's handwriting. And it basically says the positions of all the U.S. Special Forces units worldwide on this particular date, December 5th, 1988, including the Navy SEALs, the latitude, the longitude, all of our elite military readiness. Now, the Soviets would have loved to have that. And then another, if you don't mind this one, look at this one. Move that one up, Paul, if you don't mind. This is a warning order from the Joint Chiefs of Staff that has gone out, this top secret for training has gone out to the all the elite U.S. commands. It's the one on the left of the screen.
Oh, I see the left.
The other, anyway, so Ali Muhammad is stealing these things, and he's coming up to New York on weekends while he is an active duty U.S. Army sergeant, and as he comes up on weekends, he's training the guys who later blow up. I want to ask you one more time. You didn't think you're going to have to work this out. See if you can hold this up fairly close.
See these four
Another great thing about the timeline is it's like a glossary of the people involved, which makes it so much easier to read.
Yeah, because you have many names, Mahmoud, Muhammad. Okay, see that now, if you don't mind. The picture in the upper corner, first the guy's in the bottom. The guy in the extreme left, the red-headed fellow, is Mahmoud Abu Alima, Egyptian cab driver, limo driver. Next to him, Mohammed Salema, and on the other side, the guy with the glasses is Nidal Ayad. They are later convicted in the World Trade Center bombing. They were working with Ramzi Youssef to blow up the towers. The man in the second from the right is El Sayed Nasser. He is the man who kills Rabbi Meir Kahane on December 5th, 1990, and the Marriott Hotel on Lexington Avenue. Now, up above, you see that picture in the upper corner? That is actually one of dozens of FBI surveillance photos, because the FBI was following these guys when Bush 41 was in the White House in 1989. On 4 weekends in July, they follow them from a mosque in Brooklyn out to Calverton, Long Island, to this shooting range. And this is, Joni, like a half an hour north of the Hamptons. In the middle of July, they're firing AK-47s. And one of the pictures that they take is Nasser firing a gun that he later uses to kill this world figure, this rabbi. So you'd think, oh my God, by now the alarm bell should be going off, right? No. And
now, in fact, wasn't Nasser, to be fair, for whatever reasons, acquitted of the actual killing?
He was acquitted of the killing, and to the credit of Patrick Fitzgerald and Andrew McCarthy, the two prosecutors, later when they indicted the Blind Sheikh and 11 others in what they call the Day of Terror plot to blow up the bridges and tunnels, they then indicted Nasser, and he was ultimately convicted of the murder. So to their credit, they had follow through. But the thing is, Nasser was trained by Ali Muhammad. So you've got this Al-Qaeda spy training this World Trade Center bombing cell. And one of the things I find out is that a year earlier, in 1992, he's opened as an FBI informant on the West Coast. There's an agent named John Zen, who's his, quote, control agent. So obviously New York isn't talking to California. And even when in New York, when they start to look at the material they try Nasser as a lone gunman, even though it's clearly an international conspiracy. The night of the murder, they find Abu Alima and Salema, two of those same guys, at the house. They arrest him, they let him go the next day. So now you start to move into the Trade Center bombing, which we prove in the book, and it's all in the timeline, that they could have prevented the first Trade Center bombing. So you have the first...
In 93.
In 93. So this is an embarrassment to the Bureau that has never really come out until this...
My first call, we have a phone call.
Sure, go ahead.
Let's give it a shot. I mean, come... Hello, you're on the air.
I see you whining.
All right, let's continue on. Let's go with the
small musical
former
interlude.
FBI agent who's now working as a lounge singer.
Right.
Anyway, off the Times Square. So, anyway... So what you have now is the Trade Center bombing. I prove in my first book, 1,000 Years for Revenge. And if you go on peterlance.com, you can just, you can order these books and download a lot of this material. I prove that they could have stopped the first bombing. So now what happens is they had an informant, a good Egyptian ex-army officer named Salem, who was loyal to America. And he had infiltrated the Blind Sheikh, the bombing cell, and an ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in charge, with no terrorism experience, didn't like him, didn't trust him, didn't like Nancy Floyd, the special agent who was remarkable, who recruited him. She was a strong woman, whatever, okay? So for office political reasons, in my opinion, they blow this guy out. He leaves the cell. The last thing he says to Nancy Floyd in October, he now knows that something is afoot. They've now brought Ramzi Youssef in, a world-class bomber trained in Wales, an engineer, and he says, "There's something. Follow Mahmoud Al-Balim and Salema, those same two guys. If you do not, don't call me when the bombs go up," plural. He knew something was going on. Cut to the chase. The night after the bombing, and 2 days later, they bring Salem back. They were paying him $500 a week. Now they pay him $1.5 million to do what he could have done before and prevent it. So he rounds up the Blind Sheikh and all these guys.
People should know he was the fellow who taped himself.
Right.
With his handlers.
Right.
With his handlers.
And you have that tape from WBAI, a remarkable tape.
I got a copy of the tape, and it's a remarkable tape. It goes on for about a dozen minutes, and what's the most amazing, besides the actual things that were said, the way that they were like wheeling and dealing over small amounts of money was absolutely fascinating. And at the end, when the pizza delivery comes and he has to cut off his conversation in order to get his pizza, is one of the most, it's chilling in a sense, because things are said like, well, you don't want me to help you, then maybe they build a bomb another way.
He's threatening to say that the Bureau had prior knowledge and that he's going to, if they don't give him enough money, because they were really nickeling and diming. This guy really was a legitimate good guy who risked his life. And what they ended up doing was they blew him out. So now they're trying to get him back from, and they end up paying him $1.5 million. But at that point, he's talking to John Anisef, this FBI agent, and he's negotiating,
And I'd like to mention you can hear that tape on our website.
On our website, yeah. So definitely, and just besides giving you, just go to this website here. It's on our on the screen, or just type in Emad Salem.
Yeah,
S-A-L-E-M. It comes right up.
Right. Yeah. And if I'll plug my own, if you go to peterlance.com, again, you'll see this first part of the timeline where he falls into this. So now you've got the fact that they wrap up the cell that they should have wrapped up before the bombing very quickly. Yeah. They look great. The feds look great. But nobody knew until I wrote my first book that Nancy Floyd was really trying to stop this ahead of time. John Miller does a book called The Cell. Doesn't even mention Nancy Floyd's name in the whole book. It's like doing the takedown of John Dillinger without mentioning Melvin Purvis.
What happened to Nancy in the end?
Nancy, I spoke to Nancy by email the other day. She's in Denver. She's got a few years left before retirement, and she's keeping her head down and hoping for the best.
They let her continue her
job. They did for a while, but recently she was kind of intimidated, and I don't want to get into it right now. But anyway, but they set her up, Paul. 4.5 years.
Why would they? Here's somebody who's obviously doing a little extra work.
Absolutely.
Work.
Right.
To track down realistic threats. I mean, that she's come across in the course of her job, and yet they're like saying to her things like, "You're wasting time. You're supposed to go after Soviet spies. What are you bringing this crap in here for? What are you bothering us?"
Worse than that, they accused her of having an affair with Salem. They leaked the story to the New York Post. The temptress and the spy, completely specious. And how do we know that it's specious? Because the reason you have the tape is that Salem was so mistrustful of the FBI based on how he only trusted Nancy. He really trusted her, and he thought they were going to set him up. So he was taping them. Not only was he taping the bad guys, he was taping them. And it's on those tapes that we now can say that he says to her, we could have prevented this, and it's clear from the tapes that they had nothing but a very platonic relationship. In any event, they now pay him $1.5 million. He wraps up the cell, and now Patrick Fitzgerald. Now we move to this case, the Day of Terror case.
I want to put it this way. Let me just take your book for 1 second, because as we go to part 2 here of the show, the full name of your book, Triple Cross: How Bin Laden's Master Spy Penetrated the CIA, the Green Berets, and the FBI, and Why Patrick Fitzgerald Failed to Stop Him. Peter Lance is our guest. I'm Paul DeRienzo, Miss Jo Marie Musi. Our program is Let Them Talk. And
why? We're live. You can call us if you'd like.
Yes. Why did Patrick Fitzgerald, tell people who, I mean, maybe some people were in like Time Machine or something like that, they don't know who Patrick Fitzgerald is.
Patrick Fitzgerald is currently the U.S. Attorney in Chicago, and he's also the special prosecutor in the CIA leak case, and he is, without a doubt, considered the most authoritative bin Laden expert, al-Qaeda expert in the Justice Department. In fact, Vanity Fair did a famous piece you can Google called "Mr. Fitz Goes to Washington" in February. It was like it was a press release for, incredibly praiseworthy. They called him the bin Laden brain, etc. He's enjoyed nothing but positive press, except after he began to investigate the CIA leak. Of course, those that those that were partisans of the Bush administration didn't like him, and then many liberals, after he stopped only at Scooter Libby and didn't go all the way, many liberals have now had doubts about him. But believe me, I did not in any way set out to do a book on Patrick Fitzgerald. I set out to tell the Ali Muhammad story. And who was it that gave me the full details on Patrick Fitzgerald? Was Jack Clunan, a former agent in Squad I-49. Now, those of you who...
Squad
I-49 was the elite bin Laden squad. There was a squad that was rededicated in January of '96 to getting bin Laden. That was the Clinton's directive, pretty much. And so Fitzgerald was directing this unit, and then Alec Station was set up at the CIA, named after Mike Scheuer, his son Alec. And it was the first dedicated CIA station that was not dedicated to a country, but to a person.
To a particular
so
person.
when Dan Coleman, one of the agents from Squad I-49, was seconded down there, he was down there, so he was seeing what the CIA was. The book, The Looming Tower, which is written by a respected New Yorker writer named Lawrence Wright. It was on the New York Times list for 6 weeks or more. Got an incredible page-one review by Dexter Filkins of the New York Times on August 6th. That book, and I'm not trying to knock another author's work, but that book tells half of the story. It basically, Lawrence Wright accepts the word of many of these FBI agents, and he doesn't analyze them. He doesn't challenge them. I talk to many of the same agents, and I kind of audit them. So Jack Clunan, who also spoke extensively to him, talked to me on May 4th, a 4-hour interview, and also did another interview for this National Geographic special, which I finally got the transcripts of. And he said, for example, Patrick Fitzgerald, in October of '97, has a meeting in Sacramento with Ali Muhammad. He flies to California with Clunan, another FBI agent, and they meet Ali Muhammad. And Fitzgerald thinks maybe he can turn him at this point. And basically, Ali Muhammad, listen to what he says to him. He says, I love bin Laden. I don't need a fatwa or religious decree to attack America. I have a number of agents I can make operative like at any time, and I can disappear whenever I want. And he basically goes like this to Patrick Fitzgerald. Now, Fitzgerald left the meeting, and according to Clunan, said, that is the most dangerous man I've ever met. We cannot leave him on the street. The reason that the National Geographic documentary only told part of the story, they just told a fascinating story of Ali Muhammad, and the reason that I would like people, if they want the full truth, to read this book, is that they left out a very important line in the documentary. They left out the part about not leaving him on the street. Yeah. And that's where the negligence comes in, because they left him on the street, and Ali, 10 months later, the very plot that Ali did the surveillance on in '93, October, came to pass. 224 people dead, simultaneous truck bombs in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and Nairobi, Kenya, 4,000 people injured. And Ali was
Let's get back to that question, though. Why would... and Joni, we were discussing this earlier because you've been following Mr. Fitzgerald's career, and you were saying earlier this afternoon to me that...
Well, the hype about him is that he's a great prosecutor, a rabid prosecutor.
Uncorruptible.
That's right. Somebody in the New York Times op-ed called him the Inspector Javert, referring to Les Miserables.
Right.
The non-stop,
so his reputation is so against what you're saying.
Yeah, except that what began to happen was Patrick Fitzgerald was a person in the Southern District that had a dual role, head of organized crime and terrorism, ironically. And believe it or not, this is going to sound like a wild conspiracy theory, but I only ask you to go to my website or order the book or look at Cover Up, the second book, and you will see that the FBI and the Justice Department in '96 had a treasure trove of evidence. In fact, I'm going to ask you to do some work one more time. I want to have on my website, peterlance.com, you will see, if you click FBI 302, you'll see a number of FBI internal memos. One of the FBI 302s that are on my site is in the book, and it's basically this from the 5th of March of '96, and basically Greg Scarpa Jr. is a mob guy. I couldn't make this up. Only in New York did this happen.
And other people have been following this case. Scarpa's been around a long time.
Scarpa Jr.
A lot of reporters have been following
right.
him.
He's in the middle cell. Yusuf is here. They finally captured him, brought him back, rendered him back. And over here in another cell is Abdul Hakim Murad, Yusuf's oldest friend, trained in 4 U.S. flight schools, by the way. Yusuf breaks a bed strut away and starts passing notes through Scarpa to Murad. And Scarpa, whose father stayed out of jail for only did 30 days and 30 years by ratting out other mob guys to the feds, Scarpa Jr. tells the feds. They give him a camera to photograph this, and then they set up a phony mafia front company called Roma Corporation. Not particularly imaginative, but nonetheless. And they convince Yusuf, who's seen The Godfather, that the mob is across town at the Flatiron Building, and if he calls from the tier, they'll patch his calls through. Well, it's a brilliant idea. That way, they're going to be able to monitor where he calls. He calls one of the calls to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, his uncle in Doha, Qatar, and that's how they go to find him, only to lose him in Doha. But
well, didn't they say that Sheikh Omar Abdurrahman was dangerous in that he was allegedly through the offices of Lynn Stewart passing messages to end? In other words, what they said about Lynn is worse than what is not as bad as what you're saying they did themselves.
Well, I don't want to make a judge.
It's just interesting to me. Yeah.
My opinion on Lynn Stewart is for another program, another time. But anyway, I believe the Sheikh was incredibly dangerous, and I think by the time she was representing him, she knew what was going on, and I'm not one of those cheerleaders for Lynn Stewart. But anyway, here's the thing. The FBI knows for 11 months this thing goes on. Scarpa Jr. risks his life. Yusuf threatens his family and everything, okay? And they're getting this incredible information. However, there are a series of mob cases in the Eastern District in Brooklyn that are related to Scarpa's father, who was a mad dog killer, and an alleged corrupt FBI agent named R. Linley DeVecchio. And they basically do, in my opinion, an ends-means decision. They decide, because if they make Scarpa Jr. credible on this intelligence, then that means when he later says, my father is in bed with this FBI guy, then that's going to blow that scandal sky high, and it's going to be worse than Ruby Ridge or Waco or anything. So what they do is, to keep these 60 mob cases alive, they make an ends-means decision that Al-Qaeda's threat is less than the threat from the mafia, okay? Clearly. And what they do is they basically call all of this evidence a hoax and a scam. I invite you to go to my website. You'll see there are...
This was they just wanted they wanted to get this guy on the organized crime stuff, and they didn't want to complicate it with all these other things.
They wanted to preserve... There were 75 original cases in the Colombo War. 14 of them were dismissed when an enterprising team of lawyers, Alan Futerfas and Ellen Resnick, realized that maybe DeVecchio, the Scarpa Sr., was an agent provocateur, and therefore his testimony would be inadmissible. Now, 14 cases, they convinced the judge. Now they're looking at, oh my God, the 60. Judge Weinstein, the lion of the Eastern District, said the cases will unravel if this continues. So now they're worried they're going to let mobsters out of jail, millions of dollars spent, and they go, you know, we've got Yusuf for 240 years, we've got the Blind Sheikh for 240 years, most of these guys are wrapped up, this Al-Qaeda thing, and they make this fatal decision. They call this intelligence a hoax and a scam. Now here's where Fitzgerald comes in. I have an affirmation in this book, a smoking gun document, where he, in 1999, basically says that it looked like legitimate, but then we realized it was a hoax and a scam. Like, as if Yusuf is going to make the stuff up and give it to the feds, and Scarpa Jr.'s got a less than high school education. How would he come up with these schematics of, you know, watches and planning on playing?
Before, and I'll show it again on the book.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, this is, you know, what's funny is that they say, well, it's not so funny that, you know, certain things are being taken off the internet because they're so dangerous, and yet, you know, here you go, right here. Don't do this at home.
Well, no, there's nothing. I want you to know that I've taken out key material from all of this stuff so that no one ever could misuse it. Yeah, I'm very conscious of that.
Very good.
But in any event, this is clearly genuine. The feds would not have gone on for 11 months if it wasn't genuine. And John Napoli is a mobster that they cite, Fitzgerald cites. Well, I'm doing a radio show one night. He hears me in prison in Texas. He calls through his sister. I interviewed him in his lawyer's office last February 11th, and he told me in no uncertain terms, I recorded it with his permission, I'd never called it a hoax and scam. These guys are lying, these feds. Peter, I'm telling you, it was legit. What Scarpa had was legit, okay, in terms of Yusuf. So I prove in this book that Patrick Fitzgerald was a party to burying or suppressing evidence for the flimsiest of excuses, using this mob guy, and And
did he lack a vision here? Is this somebody who just couldn't put the pieces
No,
together?
it was an ends means decision. Like every day in business, they make cost-benefit analysis. We have an unsafe product. Is it cheaper to take it off the market, or should we just pay off all the wrongful death actions and people injured? You see what I mean?
Exactly.
It's cost-benefit.
Right.
They do it in the government too.
Considering what happened in the end, boy, they got it wrong.
They sure did. That was at the time, but
now, do you consider it negligence on this?
The reason I consider it beyond negligence. I consider it affirmative obstruction of justice, because by the fall of '96, in addition to all of this other information they're getting, and by the way, this is coming from Ramzi Youssef, the Mozart of terror, not some peripheral guy who drove a truck. This is the Bin Laden office of origin in the Southern District. They're getting us from the horse's mouth, okay? And for one of the things he says, active Al-Qaeda cell in New York. He says that there's a plot to hijack a plane to free the blind sheikh, which later shows up in the famous Crawford, Texas presidential daily briefing of August 6th, 3 weeks before 9/11. That's how important it was. And they bury it. And you know what else they bury? A note from Youssef saying how to smuggle explosives onto an airliner, right? And what is in that note? But a formula where he says you could use acetone peroxide. Can you push that right up there and show them? Acetone peroxide. Yeah. And what is acetone peroxide? Is the ingredient, you have to move a little bit into the light, right in the middle of the screen. Yeah. Acetone peroxide was the essential ingredient in the plot uncovered in August by the MI5, the Brits, the transatlantic plot. So these guys are just going to perfect Ramzi Youssef's plot. What I'm getting at here is, as Rory O'Connor, a great journalist who wrote a review of my book, said, it was a conspiracy to cover up incompetence. And then at a certain point, oh my God, we've gone so far that, well...
We have a minute to go. What should be done? What should we learn? What
I have a quick question, too. Where is Ali Muhammad today?
He's in custodial witness protection. He's in witness protection, but he's in jail. He's not roaming free, but he's never been sentenced. That's one of the important
Has he been charged with anything?
He's copped a plea. He's admitted to his role in the African embassies, but he never had to testify. Right. The thing we should learn is that the FBI needs reform. It has not reformed significantly. New York remains at risk. I'm not a gloom and doom sayer here, but my kids live in New York. I love this city, and it remains at risk, and the Bureau has not. They don't even have a computer system that could do what I did with Google, FileMaker Pro, and the Internet.
Should heads roll, or should there be reforms? Has enough been done?
I think the Secret Service. I think the Secret Service should assume counterterrorism. They're in the threat prevention business. The FBI is in the crime solution business. Completely different mindset, and they're already in place. You just have to improve the Secret Service, and expand it. They did the Salt Lake Olympics. They do counterfeiting investigation. They've saved many presidents.
In the few seconds we have left, Peter Lance, this is Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DeRienzo with Miss Joan Marie Musi.
PeterLance.com.
Who should
PeterLance.com.
PeterLance.com. Who should get fired? Anybody get fired?
Well, Director Mueller should have been fired in April of 2002 when he said there isn't a single piece of paper in our files that could have warned us about the plot. My book is full of those pieces of paper, viewers, and I invite you. You want the truth, you New Yorkers, you should demand the truth. And there's so much of the truth in this book and the other two that I've written. If you just go to PeterLance.com, if you read The Looming Tower and you liked it, believe me, you will be riveted by this book.
There we go. All right.